The Green Party released its entire platform today. Elizabeth May revealed the details in the riding where she's running in Nova Scotia. Here's some of the highlights. The plan calls for a $50 per ton carbon tax and new taxes on toxic chemicals. That revenue would be used to cut income and payroll taxes and introduce taxpayers' income splitting. Employers' contributions to employment insurance and the Canada Pension Plan would go down. Corporate taxes would be cut by $50 for every ton of carbon emissions reduced. As well, the GST would rise to 6%, with $3 billion of that revenue directed towards investment in municipal infrastructure projects. The Green Party promises to work towards a guaranteed annual income in place of what they're calling the current costly and demeaning maze of support programs. Now, the Greens also promised to renegotiate the North American Free Trade Agreement. And on the defense front, there is a commitment to restore Canada's peacekeeping role and in Afghanistan, to shift from a NATO-led mission to one led by the United Nations. Well, to explain more on all of this, look who's here. Elizabeth May joins me now from New Glasgow, Nova Scotia. Elizabeth May, thank you for coming on the broadcast. A lot of debate going on about whether or not we would be driven into deficit by spending promises. You have an even more significant carbon tax than the Liberals, and I'm wondering, and lots of other things like a guaranteed annual income, which would not be cheap. I'm wondering how you think you can manage all that and not go into deficit.
Well, not only that, having just heard your clips of Jack Layton and Stéphane Dion, I'm really pleased to discover that our child care commitments within our whole package we released today for universal access to child care, we've committed $1 billion in the first year, and by the third year it goes up to $3 billion. This is all made possible by cutting subsidies to large polluters and through tax shifting. The good news in terms of how is it all possible, which is your question, is that we've costed it. It's available for people to look at, and you can see exactly how it's possible. In fact, our budgets end up running surpluses. I think that's wise given the current uncertainties in global markets, the collapses within the U.S. stock markets, and I think it's appropriate to say we're going to run a surplus, and as long as it continues to be a surplus, we can pay down the debt with some of it and use the rest of it for our larger commitments to infrastructure improvements, such as National Rail.
Well, okay, but think about this for a moment, and I want to I'll come back to some of those points in a moment. You know the complaint by the NDP and the Conservatives and why they said you should not be in the debate. They said that you and Stéphane Dion were basically on the same side and had the same program. And when I look at his plan, and it's called the Green Shift Plan, he just left out the word tax, but he's talking about shifting taxes. And you just put the word tax into the Green Tax Shift Plan. And basically, the principle in each is the same. So why are you not, along with Stéphane Dion, basically running on the same platform, at least on the environment?
Well, you certainly know that our Green Shift Plan was announced about a year earlier and many years of commitment to the concept. The details were announced last fall before Stephen Harper had his last speech from the throne. And the very telling argument that I liked from Chantal Hebert in the 1988 election, no one said that it should be either Ed Broadbent or John Turner to make the case against the free trade agreement. In a democracy, sometimes parties agree with each other partially on different parts of the platform. Certainly Mr. Layton's views on NAFTA will be closer to those of the Green Party. Perhaps someone should suggest that he should get off the stage so I could make the case against NAFTA. Let
me ask you about the guaranteed annual income. How much would that cost?
Guaranteed livable income is something that in our platform we explain requires a government at the federal level to move forward and negotiate with the provinces. It's going to be something that provincial, municipal, and federal governments have to do together. It's essentially a negative income tax, and as you know, someone who is as conservative as Senator Hugh Segal has been the prime advocate for it lately in Canada, but its history goes back, and really we need to make the case that Canada is a wealthy country. We can actually eliminate poverty.
No, but Elizabeth, you know well that was a popular idea in the late 80s and early 90s, and it was set aside as being too expensive for the country.
No,
and the argument was, and I say this to someone running in Nova Scotia, that in areas of higher unemployment, where people work 10 weeks to get their stamps and then get 42 weeks of employment, as we call it, insurance now, that is the closest thing you're going to get to a guaranteed annual income, and it is available for people in areas of high unemployment. So we already have it de facto, if not really.
Don, it used to be available in areas of high unemployment. It's been cut back to such an extent that so many people have fallen off ability to reach EI, that they fall into the welfare rolls and they cease being able to look for work, because looking for work when you're on welfare requires that you know you're going to make enough to get above the amount clawed back. It's a losing system. What we talked about with guaranteed livable income is that at this point in this country, very few people know how the concept could work. The fact that it's promoted by people all across the political spectrum suggests to me and to the Greens that we need to take it forward and allow Canadians to debate it and see if, when we are in a position within the House of Commons to influence a government, we can go forward to make it work. It will take years of negotiation. So in the short term, we're addressing poverty, and it's a serious issue, certainly in my riding, which has been neglected for a long time, despite having a so-called powerful cabinet member. We want to ensure that low-income seniors immediately receive a 25% increase on their guaranteed income supplements.
I got to get into another topic, Afghanistan.
Yes.
If you can influence a government in Parliament, would you change our role from the combat role it is now and do that before 2011? And you say that you want to change it from a NATO-led role to a United Nations role, but the fact is NATO is doing it on behalf of the United Nations and was asked by the United Nations to take it on.
Not quite. The NATO mission was initially sanctioned by the United Nations, but the truth of the matter is we're losing ground, the Taliban's gaining ground, and the fundamental flaws, many of which were identified in the Manley report with our current mission, is the overlay of the heavy imprint of the U.S.-led mission, the fact that NATO countries are certainly perceived by the Taliban and local villagers in Afghanistan as being primarily an effort led by Western Christian nations. A true UN mission could bring in countries with more Islamic background. We need to deal with the fact that it's an absolutely failed strategy to try to eradicate the poppy crops.
But do you know any Islamic countries that want to go to Afghanistan, Elizabeth May? Because I don't know any that do.
Well, I don't think.
And want to take on some kind of a peacekeeping or military role there.
Let's be clear that Canada has now dropped to among the worst of participants in peacekeeping missions led by the United Nations. Developing countries are picking up the slack, but they need training and they need help. And I talked this over, frankly, when we were first working on these ideas within the Green Party, and I can tell you former President Bill Clinton didn't think it was an outrageous idea. Countries like Malaysia, there are countries around the world that can participate in UN peacekeeping missions where they receive money per soldier who serves.
Well, I know that's why they do it. That's why they can afford to do it, because it pays their troops.
But on the other hand, we need to face the facts that NATO mission isn't working.
I want to stop Afghanistan. I want to go to NAFTA. How would you change NAFTA? And if you couldn't change it, would you get out of it?
We need to change those sections that aren't working in Canadian interests. Those would be Chapter 11, which allows U.S. corporations to sue us and claim millions of dollars even when our government makes a decision which is completely fortified by sound science, but for which a U.S. corporation can sue us, whether it was an appropriate regulatory decision or not. We need to look at the energy chapter of NAFTA and see why we are restricted to maintaining exports to the United States, even over Canadian interests in a better energy supply system to reach to the East Coast. And we need to know why we would continue to have NAFTA with the risk of bulk water exports. These are sections, among others, of NAFTA that need to be fixed. And certainly the U.S. presidential campaign, on at least the Democratic side, suggested a willingness to open up NAFTA to renegotiation.
Elizabeth May, wish we had more time. Come back again.
Me too. Sorry I interrupted you, Don.
No, I interrupted you, and I apologize for that. But look, it's live television. Elizabeth, thanks for coming on.
It's live and exciting. Talk to you later.